So 1990 was 30 years ago now. That's really insane to me because I'm born in 1990. I'll be 30 years old in a few days. So when I consider that I've now been through 3 decades of time, it's really hard for me to believe because like the last half of my life has gone by in a blur. For example, oh, by the way, happy International Slayer Day, everyone. I hope you've all got your Slayer on today, loud and proud, all day. This is Slayer's 2006 album, Christ's Illusion. I talked about this the other day in my Richard McCook contest entry video. This is the first Slayer record that came out during the time in which I was a fan. So I missed God Hates Us All that came out in 2001 by a year or two. I became a fan in 2003 or 2002, 2003. So I remember this album like it was yesterday. I remember the lead up to it, you know, the year and a half or so lead up to it. I remember the singles that came out beforehand. I remember buying this day of release, this copy on day of release. I remember listening to it for the first time. I remember my initial thoughts. So when I consider that was half of my life ago, it really puts things into perspective that time is going by very, very fast. So if I can say anything, it's make sure you're doing things that you love with the people that you love, because at the end of the day, time is all we've got and it's going by too fucking fast. So make sure that you're having a good time with people that you like a lot. So yeah. So back to my point, or my original thought of 1990 being 30 years ago. I thought it would be really fun to do a 9 from 90 video. So 9 records from 1990 that are celebrating their 30th anniversaries, or 30th anniversary. But weirdly enough, I hardly have any. I have like 7 or 8 records from 1990. So, which is weird because I have a ton from 88, a ton from 89, and a ton from 92, or 91 and 92, but hardly any from 1990. So I thought I'd do 8 from 88 because it sounds cool. And I have a ton of records from 88. I could have done like a 10 or 12 list video of just thrash records. There are so many thrash records that came out that year. But I figured I'd keep it varied just because it's more fun. So I'll kick it off with a couple rap albums, and then I'll do a couple industrial records, and then we'll just do 4 kind of all over the maps. So the first off record is NWA with Straight Outta Compton. This is a super, super great album and a very, very important record in terms of musical history. I'm a big I'm a big old school hip hop and old school rap fan, gangster rap fan. I don't pretend to know it like I do punk rock or metal or industrial or whatever. I know, you know, the basics, and I'm okay with only knowing the basics for now. I don't have a, you know, an urge or a yearning to get into rap deeper, but what I do like, I really, really love. So this album included, you know, Dr. Dre, Eazy-E, MC Ren, DJ Yella, Ice Cube. These guys are really talented guys, and this is a really a Sound of the Times album, but it doesn't sound dated. It sounds fresh, but you can hear the time period that it was in, and to me that is really awesome. I love those little time capsule records, is what I kind of call them. This is the 20th anniversary edition, so it came out in 2008, which is also crazy to think that 2008 was 12 years ago. It's got the record spread out on 3 sides, and then it's got a 4th side of bonus tracks of basically covers of songs off of this record by other rappers. So like Bone Thugs and Harmony and Snoop Dogg and guys like that. So this is a really great record to have if you don't have it. And if you're interested in rap, I always start at the beginning for everything, whether it be punk rock or metal or whatever. I always eventually go back to the roots. So roots, I guess you could also go listen to the roots if you want to get into rap. But I would suggest starting here because this is really, innovative and influential and really important. So I think if you don't care for this record, rap might not be for you at all. Next up is an album by my favorite rapper of all time. This is Ice-T with his second album, Power. This is a really heavy album in terms of content. The song Drama is probably my favorite. Check it out if you haven't heard it before, or if you haven't really heard Ice-T or his rap music for that matter. I love everything Ice-T's ever done. I really respect him a lot as a person and as a businessman, and I think he's a very, very intelligent and a good person. So I got into his music really early on, like when I was 12 or 13, and Body Count was the first thing that I listened to, and then I found his rap music, and through his realistic street lyrics, showing both sides of things, how, you know, guns and pimps and hookers and drugs and the things that rap often glamorizes, or what gangster rap at the time was glamorizing heavily. he was showing that, you know, if you do these things, you're just gonna get yourself into piles of shit. So because he had done them, so he's talking about real life experience, and which a lot of rappers do and did, but he put a no bullshit, no filter aspect to it, where he showed you, if you know, play with guns, you're probably gonna get shot and killed. If you do drugs, you're probably gonna die. You're not gonna be the king of the world. You're gonna be in the fucking ground. So I always appreciated that, and it led me to other of his works, including books he's written, you know, shows he's done, and that's more Hollywood. But I really like Ice-T a lot, and I would really like to meet him. I think he's a really cool guy, and he's always been one of my, in terms of celebrities, because I don't really follow celebrity culture, and I don't really care about, you know, the glitterati. But I love Ice-T, and I would really, really appreciate and love meeting him. So all that to say, Ice-T, second record, Power, came out in '88. Check it out. Next up, a couple industrial records. First is The Land of Rape and Honey. This is Ministry's third album. Was the first to feature Paul Barker on bass. So this was the start of his, you know, long partnership with Al Jourgensen from this album up until Animosity Samina that came out in 2003. Try saying that 3 times fast. So for that 15 years or so, Ministry had that distinct Ministry sound that, when I consider he's been gone now for almost 20 years, I still consider everything afterwards not really Ministry, even though it is. It's Al's, and I love it. I love the music. To me, Paul Barker and Paul Barker and Al were really Ministry, and I don't think anything will ever change my mind about that. In particular, this album from '88 and The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste from 1989 and Psalm 69 from '92. That kind of trilogy of albums is, to me, just the top of industrial. It's got such a distinct sound. There's in no other music is there more Ministry sound than in those 3 albums. The noises and the sounds and the production that those 2 guys together came up with is just mind-blowing to me. And I think they're essential albums for everyone to have. Saying that, I don't own Psalm 69, but it's on the list. I had it for years and years and years on multiple copies of CDs. I just never had it on vinyl before, but that'll change eventually. That said, what pisses me off about this album, on vinyl anyway, is that the tracks Hezbollah and I Prefer have never been released on the vinyl copies. So they were bonus tracks on the CD and cassette originally, or maybe just CD, you know, to push those formats as superior formats, and I think to probably drive sales away from vinyl. But in recent years, all reissues have still had those tracks omitted. So one of my biggest gripes with Ministry would be for them how they could correct, I guess, my gripe would be to finally release a reissue of this album with those 2 tracks on it, because they're awesome. They're not throwaway tracks. They're not filler. They deserve to be on the record. They're part of the record. So yeah, so The Land of Rape and Honey from Ministry. Check it out. Next up, we've got Canadian industrial legends Skinny Puppy with their 4th album, Vivisex 6. There is no music in the world, to me, as eerie and as scary as Skinny Puppy. Like, as a teenager, I couldn't listen to their music in the dark, and I probably wouldn't even be able to now. The sounds and the atmosphere that they are able to create is just mind-blowing, literally. This is really, really cool music. If you've never listened to Skinny Puppy before, I highly suggest you do, just even as a one-time sample trip, because they're really, really cool and very ahead of their time and very innovative and influential on so many countless other bands that came after them. There's 2 big tracks, or 2 big hits on this album. Censor, which on the album is called Dog Shit, but to release it as a single they called it Censor. And Texture, which is one of my favorite tracks by them ever. If you can find the 12-inch single for Texture, it's got an extended mix on it, which is like leaps and bounds. It's not better than the original because it retains the same essence of it, but it's just extended and it's longer and there's more shit added into it. So it's really, really cool. So yeah, Skinny Puppy with Vivisex 6 for my 4th album, released in 1988. Next up, we've got kind of an anomaly in my collection. I guess an anomaly in terms of what I've showed so far in my videos, but I love this kind of music. This is the Proclaimers with their second album, Sunshine on a Leaf. Of course, Craig and Charlie Reid, the famous Scottish twins. This is, of course, probably most popular for the song I'm Gonna Be 500 Miles, which was, I think, brought back into resurgence with Shrek, the Shrek movie, and everything else. I guess it's that movie. That song's been in every soundtrack imaginable. But really, really incredible folk, I guess, rock, you could call it. Really beautiful stuff. I have a lot of memories of listening to this with my grandfather. So as a kid, and then years later, I discovered it on my own, and I really love it. It's really beautiful stuff. Unfortunately, it is the only of their albums that I own. Their stuff is really, really hard to find. I was lucky to find this last summer when I was on a trip for work to a town a few hours from my city, or a city a few hours from my city, and was super psyched to find this. I'll just show you what's it's kind of a glitch on it, or not a glitch, but it's mispressed. So we've got the regular label on one side, but on the second side we've got two labels here. Luckily, the second label is only in the dead wax, so it's not in the grooves, but those things don't bother me. I like little imperfections like that. I find it gives things character, especially if it doesn't affect the sound. If it would have affected the sound, I wouldn't have bought it. But, you know, it doesn't affect it in any way. To me, it's just kind of a cool story. So, the Proclaimers, check them out. Next up, we've got Soundgarden with their first proper studio album, Ultra Mega OK. The first of two to have Hiro Yamamoto on bass, which to me is, I guess, is a fantastic bass player. This is an original copy on SST. I believe it is. I know it's got a barcode, which kind of makes me a bit weary, but SST is weird. Everything they ever release has the same catalog numbers, basically. So it's hard to say. So I guess I consider it an original copy, but it could have been pressed any time. But if I go by this original SST catalog, it does point it at being a product of its time of '88. So I'll assume it is an original. Some of the greatest vocal performances ever by Chris Cornell, in my opinion. Man, the pipes on that guy, namely on Beyond the Wheel and Mood for Trouble. The highs that he can hit, fantastic. Soundgarden, to me, really hit their peak, or really made it with Bad Motorfinger in 1991, which came 2 albums after this. I love all of Soundgarden, don't get me wrong. I love, what's it called, Down on the Upside, and I love Super Unknown, their biggest commercial release. I do prefer Down on the Upside over Super Unknown, but my point in all of this is to say, everything from 1991 back to me is just pure brilliance, and it was grunge, I suppose, but it was grunge before grunge had the name, so it was very heavy and sludgy. There's a lot of very Black Sabbath riffs on here, and a lot of doom and a lot of sludge. It's really heavy stuff, but there's also a lot of punk rock and a lot of humor, so it's fantastic. If you're not familiar with Soundgarden or Chris Cornell's work, rest in peace, by the way, other than the hits like Black Hole Sun or Spoon Man, I highly recommend that you check out their earlier music. You will not be disappointed. This is really fantastic. Next up, we've got thrash record, or crossover record, you could call it. Suicidal Tendencies with How Will I Laugh Tomorrow When I Can't Even Smile Today. I always say that record. I always say the title wrong. This is an awesome record. It's the first record to feature Mike Clark on guitar. He was in the band, of course, until 2012 and wrote most of the music to most of their songs. So his presence is felt very strongly on this record. Super strong rhythm player, great songwriter. It's also the only record to have Bob Heathcote on bass, who would be replaced on their next album by Rob Trujillo, who of course made it really big with Metallica. But anyway, this album is killer stuff. The song Sorry might be my favorite Suicidal song ever. Their first record is probably my favorite. It's hardcore all the way through. It's pretty heavy, but it's hardcore. It's not thrashy. Join the Army, which came out in their first record came out in 83, sorry. Join the Army, which came out in 87, is good. I do like it a lot. I don't like it as much as their first, and I don't like it as much as this one. When Mike Clark joined the band, like I said earlier, it really changed their sound for the better. He's a wicked songwriter and a fantastic guitar player. So this is a great starting point if you're going to get into suicidal tendencies. I always found it strange that I know the suicidal thing is it's gang related in some way, but I've always found suicidal tendencies music to be very uplifting and very inspirational, very empowering. So I always found it was kind of an ironic name to have. But anyway, this is a kick-ass record, kind of like the Ministry album I was talking about. What's it called? Psycho or Psycho Suicide. There's a song, I forget, I always mess up the name, but it's a bonus track that was released only on CD at the time, so it's not on this. And like, I don't think copies of this record that have come out reissued years later contain it either. So that stuff really bugs me. I wish I wish I could control all of the marketing or all of the for all the labels and get all these rare tracks out for completionists like me, because it drives me crazy when there's music I know that's from these sessions or from this frame that is unreleased. It just drives me crazy. So yeah, so that's my 7th album. Next up for my last record is not a studio album, it's a compilation album, but I think it warrants a spot on this list. This is Ramones Mania. This is really, really, really good. This is basically everything from the beginning of the Ramones' career in '76 up to '88. It covers material off of all of their studio albums up to the time. It has some really cool single mixes that are worth getting, and it also has the B-track Indian Giver, which was only released in the UK, which is good. I mean, regardless of where you are now, those singles are hard to track down. So it's good to have, this comp is good to have for those little things, if nothing else at all. But the reason I want to show it is Ramones records, anything after not End of the Century, but Road to Ruin from '78. Everything after Road to Ruin is like impossible to find on vinyl. They haven't reissued their '80s stuff, I don't think, ever at all. I know Let Them Eat Vinyl re-released their '90s stuff about 5 or 6 years ago, but their '80s stuff has never seen reissues. So basically, the only way that you can get basically half of the songs on this album would be to get this album, this compilation album. So track it down, because it's pretty easy to find. This has been repressed and pressed to death, or pressed and repressed to death, I should say. So you'll have no trouble finding a copy. I guess, if anything, this is a plea for Sire or whoever to please reissue the rest of the Ramones catalog, because there's people like me who are craving that shit, man. This is a reissue, like I said. The original had, you can see here, there's a nice essay, the beginning of a really cool essay. Original copies had a really nice double, because this is on 2 records, so you get 30 songs, so it's a hell of a deal. Originally, these had custom printed inner sleeves with the end of the essay and some cool pictures. I think there was like a graveyard scene with all of the Ramones that had been in the band up to that time or something, but it's a bummer that the reissues don't have it, but whatever. Yeah, so Ramones, please, let's get those records reissued, because we all need them. That's it. Those are my 8 records. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a nice weekend, and as always, be kind to each other and love each other. Thanks.